At 05:43, Russian pilots heard a sound they could not identify, a thin rising whistle sharp enough to cut through the thrum of their rotors. For the briefest moment, they wondered if it was wind, turbulence, or the compression flare of another aircraft, but the noise grew too fast, too focused. Then, without warning, the air beneath them erupted into a streak of flame. A Ukrainian missile shot upward from the tree line, locking onto the nearest Ka-52 Alligator before the pilot even had time to speak. The sky lit up as the rotorcraft burst into a fireball that rolled across the horizon. The formation shattered instantly. The remaining Ka-52 banked hard right, flares spraying downward in a desperate attempt to confuse the missile teams below. But the ambush had been engineered to punish instinct. Ukrainian forces had mapped the squadron's route for 3 days, tracking the helicopter's routine flight corridor. Drones circled silently above the valley, their thermal cameras recording every pattern the Russians repeated. Same altitude, same entry point, same exit vector. Predictability was all Ukraine needed. The Mi-8 transports flying behind the Ka-52s felt the shockwave tremble through their frames. Pilots gripped their controls, engines roaring as they pushed for altitude. But altitude meant exposure. Breaking above the tree line meant revealing their heat signatures to waiting gunners. Below, Ukrainian Munpata's teams emerged from camouflaged hides, their launch tubes rising like shadows from tall grass and shattered farm structures. The second missile fired. It arced upward with near-silent precision and struck the engine housing of a Mi-8. The explosion ripped through the fuselage, and burning fuel spilled into the open air as the rotorcraft fell sideways into the dirt. Flames engulfed the landing gear, and a column of smoke spiraled into the morning sky. Soldiers on board never had the chance to brace. A Mi-20AN Havoc gunship attempted a counterattack. The aircraft pivoted sharply, nose dipping toward the suspected launch zone. Its cannons began to roar, ripping into tree lines where shadows moved. But the strike had been planned for multiple phases. Another Ukrainian team, positioned along a ridgeline, fired a third missile. The projectile locked onto the Mi-28's cockpit. The detonation shattered the nose, blowing out glass, and sending the gunship tumbling into a violent roll. The burning remains slammed into a field, scattering debris across the grass. Within 15 seconds, 3 helicopters were down. The surviving pilots tried to regroup, calling for evasive vectors, but their radios crackled with static. The ambush had disrupted their communication network. The once tight formation dissolved into chaos as aircraft veered in different directions, each trying to escape the invisible kill box beneath them. A Mi-35 Hindi gunship attempted to climb above the battlefield. It surged upward, rotors chopping fiercely at the rising smoke. But climbing was fatal. The Ukrainian drones overhead marked the ascent instantly. A fourth missile was launched from a position concealed near a bombed-out silo. It tracked the Mi-35 through its flare screen and struck the underside like a hammer hitting an anvil. The explosion snapped the tail section clean off, sending the aircraft spiraling in a long, burning arc before crashing into a tree line. The ground below erupted with falling debris, blades, armor plating, fragments of cockpit equipment. Fires spread across the valley as fuel ignited dry grass. Ukrainian drones adjusted their altitude, capturing every impact, every plume of flame, every burst of smoke that marked the destruction of Russian air power in real time. The last 2 Mi-8s tried to escape westward, using the terrain as cover. They dipped behind a series of low ridges, rotors thundering as pilots pushed their engines to maximum. Ukrainian teams repositioned, reading the retreat like a map they had already memorized. A missile launched from the western flank, rising behind the trailing helicopter. Despite the pilot's attempt to juke left, the missile struck the rear fuselage. The helicopter lurched forward, nose down, and crashed into an irrigation ditch, erupting into a massive orange fireball. The final Mi-8 managed to clear the valley. Smoke streaks trailed behind it as it struggled to climb away from the ambush site. The sky seemed to open around it, empty and silent, until the moment the onboard sensors detected a second wave of heat signatures from above. Ukrainian drones dropped altitude again, marking the helicopter's path. A Manpei's unit positioned near a set of ruined farmhouses fired the last missile of the ambush. It hit the transport's midsection. The explosion blew open the cabin, scattering debris across the countryside. The aircraft broke apart mid-air, pieces falling like burning leaves from a collapsing tree. In under a minute, Russia lost 5 helicopters. All that remained in the valley was smoke, fire, and the skeletal remains of aircraft that moments earlier had been engines of war. Ukrainian drone operators watched from above as flames danced across shattered frames of Ka-52 Alligators, Mi-28 Havocs, Mi-35 assault gunships, and Mi-8 transports torn open by fire. Their mission complete, the teams on the ground melted back into forests, ruined farms, and ravines, leaving a battlefield littered with the wreckage of Russian aviation. On the Russian radios that survived, voices trembled. Pilots called for survivors, command posts demanded flight paths, rescue crews asked for coordinates that no longer existed. The valley had become a graveyard, a place where a carefully prepared plan had met a predictable target and crushed it with overwhelming force. By mid-morning, Russian soldiers reached the crash sites. What they found were twisted metal hulls still hot from impact, rotor blades fused with dirt, and blackened armor scattered in wide arcs across the fields. Medics worked through smoke and wreckage, searching for heat signatures that might lead to survivors. Most signals were flames or burning electronics. Few came from bodies still breathing. The loss of the helicopters triggered immediate shock throughout Russian aviation circles. The Ka-52 and Mi-28 were among their most valuable assets, machines built for frontline dominance. Losing multiple aircraft in a single ambush raised questions about route security, air defense gaps, and the vulnerability of low-altitude flight in a theater where drones could silently mark every movement. Retreating pilots avoided the corridor entirely after the strike. Russian command redirected aviation to more distant airfields, lengthening response times and reducing operational reach. Infantry units waiting for support were forced to fight without their usual eyes in the sky. Supply runs slowed, medevac times tripled, the loss of mobility rippled across the entire sector. Meanwhile, Ukrainian units analyzed footage from multiple angles. They reviewed thermal feeds, impact timing, missile trajectories, and the exact altitude variance of each target. Every recorded detail strengthened their playbook for the next ambush. Because the valley was never meant to be the final trap, it was a test bed, and the test was successful. The message sent that morning spread across the region. Ukraine controlled the low-altitude skies, and Russia had learned it the hardest way possible. The fields burned until evening. Smoke rolled across distant villages. Even hours later, the smell of burning fuel lingered in the air. But beneath the destruction lay a deeper shift in the war, a realization that air power could be taken apart not by overwhelming force, but by timing, precision, and the patience to watch for patterns. When the fires finally died, the helicopters remained where they fell, their once formidable frames reduced to charred outlines. The valley held no doubts anymore. Had witnessed how quickly a formation of powerful aircraft, Ka-52s, Mi-28s, Mi-35s, Mi-8s, could be erased by teams that moved like shadows and struck with absolute precision. And somewhere across the front line, new teams prepared new positions, studying new corridors, waiting for the next moment when the sky would fall silent just long enough to signal another kill.